As you guys know, we've been keeping a close eye over here on the Venezuela situation, including the recent allegations of war crimes and potential murder on Hegseth and the chain of command involved in the boat strikes. Well, today we have an update. Family of Colombian fisherman killed in U.S. boat strike files complaint alleging he was murdered. Alejandro Carranza was killed in a strike in the Caribbean on September 15th. Now, if this is true, then this is really bad news for the Department of War and those involved in these strikes, because this is a verifiable resident of Colombia, a sovereign nation, who was killed, a fisherman. The family of a Colombian fisherman who died in a U.S. military boat strike in September has filed a formal complaint with the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, alleging the U.S. government illegally killed him. Alejandro Carranza was killed in a strike in the Caribbean on September 15th, according to the petition filed on Tuesday. In the petition, Carranza's lawyer, Dan Kovalak, said the fisherman's family, quote, has no recourse to adequate and effective remedies in Colombia to obtain redress for the injuries they have suffered due to the actions of the United States. U.S. government officials have committed a murder and violated our sovereignty in territorial waters. Fisherman Alejandro Carranza had no ties to the drug trade, and his daily activity was fishing, Gustavo Petro, the leader of Colombia, said on X last month. The Colombian boat was adrift and displaying the distress signal due to having an outboard motor. We await explanations from the U.S. government. And of course, since then, there have been no explanations from the U.S. government. President Donald Trump said at the time he ordered the military strike against a boat that he insisted was carrying illegal drugs from Venezuela to the U.S., telling reporters the operation left, quote, big bags of cocaine and fentanyl floating around in the ocean. That is a complete lie. Absolutely zero fentanyl comes from Venezuela. It's just a lie that's being repeated over and over and over again. Fentanyl originates in China and goes through the Canadian and Mexico borders. It is well documented. Absolutely none comes through Venezuela. Mike, what do you think of this recent petition from the family of this man who was murdered in Colombia?
I'm looking at it through the lens of hopefully seeing some evidence being shared, because as you mentioned, the U.S. government has shared none. I did see in that article that it said that the petition is, through this human rights organization, so it's not really legally binding to the United States, so they won't be forced to share evidence, unfortunately. But I think seeing evidence presented that counters the claim should hopefully be all we need to at least get the conversation rolling, because if this is true, this is a very, very, very serious accusation here. And it completely dismantles the entire narrative that the Trump administration has been building. And even if somebody were to say, well, okay, this one was a fisherman, but the other ones, they were drug traffickers. It's like, well, how can we know? Because we were told all of them are drug traffickers. So now how many are, how many aren't? And even then, even if you have one that isn't, I don't think you get to just say, oh, well, that's the fog of war. This is collateral damage, when these are very specific strikes that are happening. So again, I'm looking at this through the lens of trying to get answers about what's going on with these strikes, because there has been a total information blackout. And if we're going to lay siege to Venezuela, I would like to know why we're killing fishermen from Colombia. If this is truly coming from Colombia, why are we not laying siege to Colombia instead?
Yeah, the only information that we're getting are the drone footage strikes that they're releasing, which is basically the point of impact. They're not showing us how they track these boats, where they originated. They're not showing after the fact, like the double tap strike on the second that we've been learning about recently, that Hegseth is in hot water about. We're getting very little from this administration other than trust us, bro. And quite frankly, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. We are nuking fishing boats, so to speak, out of the sky with drone attacks, and we're technically not at war with Venezuela, which absolutely does not make sense. We are committing acts of war without being at war, and that's why Hegseth is in quite a bit of trouble here, because and it's seemingly the entire chain of command, because if these are not war crimes that we're looking at, then these are worse. They're straight up murder charges, and it's going to be interesting to see how tight the administration can keep the rest of the evidence from coming out, because clearly they have they should have the full footage of these drone strikes from not just the strikes themselves, but from the tracking, from the aftermath, from, however long that they claim to know that these have been alleged drug trafficking routes.
100%, because if they've got the evidence to make these strikes, if they're making these strikes based on intelligence, then they should have the information of who was on board, what was on board, if it's drugs, what kind of drugs and how much drugs, there should be all kinds of information regarding this, and they've just had a total blackout in terms of what they give us. They just show a boat blowing up and say, see, that's another drug trafficker dead. And to me, this kind of makes me think back to, like you mentioned, about how they're doing acts of war without a declaration of war. This reminds me a lot of the Bush era war on terror. And we've already got a war on drugs from the Reagan administration. But I think this is kind of reaching a new level where we're seeing actual military action done. And it's not just against fighting cartels in the U.S. and keeping them out of the U.S., but it's now going into foreign countries and meddling over there, which I think, as an American, to me, it really concerns me that we're doing this kind of thing, especially if we're killing innocent fishermen in the process. So I definitely want to see what comes of this. It'll be interesting to see.
What doesn't make sense to me, I think, the most out of this whole situation is if you're looking to stop the flow of drugs into America, or into any nation for that matter, would you not be interested to learn more about the total drug trade of where it's coming from? Wouldn't you want to track the origins? Wouldn't you want to track where it's going to? For example, if these boats reach the U.S. shores, wouldn't they want to know like what kind of contact they're making on land, what warehouses or what houses they're taking these drugs to? It just, this doesn't make much sense to me. If your goal is to eliminate the flow of drugs, why are they just plopping them out of the sky and just eliminating all trace of finding the larger network? That part just confuses me every time we do a story on this Venezuela supposed war on drugs that's going on over there. It seems like this administration is doing everything it can to not fight the war on drugs, but to just use war as an excuse to go to war and try to do regime change, which is that really what's going on here. When you look at the reality of the situation, you know that Venezuela has the most oil of any country on this planet, and that's the real reason. This war story is just the cover, and I think a lot of people are catching on to that, and everyone knows what the real motives are.